I can't quite believe that we're standing here talking politics. For years, I didn't really care about politics. It was a kind of distant spectator sport for me. And then 2014 happened, and to be honest, I've been waking up at 3 o'clock pretty much every morning ever since. Yes. And it has been this cause that we're here for tonight.
Me at 3.
Well, kind of 3:05, really. And Dan, the joy I felt at discovering that you felt similarly passionately to me about the fact that you wanted the UK to stay together and that you wanted Scotland to be in the same country as England, Wales and Northern Ireland. Why?
Well, hello everyone, and great speech. Pamela, what a wonderful speech. Really rousing, and Andrew, obviously always fantastic to hear from you as well. So, and not too bad yourself as well. But it just makes me so proud of this organisation, everything they've achieved, to know that there's people of that calibre fighting, leading the fight back in Scotland. It's really exciting. But yeah. So, but in terms of where it begins, Tom. It's kind of custom. I feel like it's playing into the hands of the nationalists, but I also feel it's a custom on these occasions to start talking about your own cultural and family background. So I'm just going to go with the nationalists for a minute, because I come from a family. I have a grandparent from every constituent part of the UK, and they were fiercely, passionately proud of where they all came from. But it was a different kind. It wasn't a modern political nationalism. It was a romantic, folk, almost 19th century nationalism. It was a great pride in being from Wales. So my nine was a Welsh speaker from Gwynedd in North Wales, and yet she was enormously proud of Gwynedd. Don't talk to her about people in Cardiff, but she was enormously proud of Gwynedd. And she was a great believer in Britain as well. And she was for that matter, a passionate internationalist in many as well. My grandfather was a professional Scot, even though I'm not entirely sure he ever went there, but he was the third or fourth identifiable Robert Macmillan, and therefore I assume there were several more before that. And they came from the Mull of Kintyre, they came from Campbelltown. If the Macmillans here, they'll know that everyone in Campbelltown's called Macmillan. A couple of nods, so that's good. And they emigrated in the 1880s, went to Canada. My grandpa was the second generation to be born in Canada, but entirely, not obviously, to Scottish people, Laidlaw mother and Macmillan father. And my childhood was going to Canada, and we had to dress up and go to big Macmillan family picnics. And some brilliantly geriatric old bloke from the West Coast who passed himself off as the clan chief would get sort of feted, and he looked thrilled, because people were sort of throwing goodies at him, and all sorts going on in Ontario, and big, so the pipes were a big part of my childhood. And then Dad's family were Irish, and then the Welsh as well. So a bit of English there too. So I felt, as we began this slide in the 1990s towards identification as English or Welsh or whatever, you were rarely able to tick the British box. You were rarely able to tick the UK box, and I felt, just personally, therefore I was being denied, at the risk of sounding like a posh white guy that's complaining about how unfair life is. But I felt that somehow my identity was actually being denied to a certain extent. So, and when Scotland set off on this path towards separation, or certainly decided about separation, for me it was like being a child watching your parents having a disastrous divorce and feeling totally helpless. And Pamela, as you said, however, at one stage I realised that perhaps we didn't have to be so helpless. And that was the time when I got very drunk with Tom Holland in a pub in King's Cross and found out that he too shared my great passion. And like so many other English people, we were standing around asking each other, and lots of people in this room, I'm sure, who were denied a vote, and whether they were Scottish or Orange, found ourselves thinking the future of our country, the future of this great beacon of Western liberal democracy, one of the most remarkable, I believe, a great force for good in the world, was being thrashed out, and hardly any of us had any impact or any say in what was going on. And I discovered that, Tom, you, as a young man, flirted with Scottish nationalism. And all sorts of nationalism, Tom.
Well, yes, rather improbably, at about the age of 20, I was probably Wiltshire's only Scottish nationalist. I discovered a copy of Alastair Gray's great novel Lanark about Glasgow in an Oxfam shop, and read it, and then read everything else he wrote, and it turned out that he was a massive Scottish nationalist. And I thought, wow, that's really quite powerful, and it's kind of hit me almost as a taboo thought, the idea that perhaps Britain could be divided up, in which case if Alastair Gray just became Scottish, then I'd kind of just become English. And it was such a kind of novel idea that for a few weeks I really thought, well, that'd be really very interesting. Very, very interesting. And then suddenly I thought, no, that's a terrible idea. I don't want that to happen. And I remembered how at school I'd always written, you know, my name, and then I'd written my village where I grew up, and then I would write the valley in which I lived, and then I'd write the county I grew up, which was Wiltshire, and then I'd write England, and then I'd write Britain, and then I'd write Europe, and then I'd write the world, and then I'd write the solar system, and so it would go on, Milky Way, and so on. And suddenly it was like, I don't want to have my identity with the Milky Way denied me. I don't want to be taken out of the solar system. And in the same way, I didn't want to stop feeling British. I liked being English, but I liked being able to go to Scotland and feel that it was somehow different, but not so different that it wasn't a part of me. And to be honest, it was all about the Loch Ness Monster, really. It was the thought of being deprived of the Loch Ness Monster would no longer in some way be mine. And so as a result of that, I kind of became very, very paranoid about the thought of, well, how many Alastair Grays are there up there who no longer want to be part of Britain and want me just to become English? And disconcerting, I found there were actually quite a lot. And as time went on, there seemed to be more and more of them. And then when I met Dan, I can't remember exactly when it was, whether the SNP had won the election that would allow them to have the vote. But I felt pretty tense by then. I mean, I suddenly thought, wow, I really am going to have to get into politics here. And the thing that was that struck us was that nobody else down here in England really seemed to care, or if they didn't care, they
felt completely disempowered.
Yeah, well, I think also they were oblivious to it. And the only time it cut through in 2014 was at the Brits, when David Bowie sent Kate Moss to pick up an award, and unexpectedly at the end she said, "Scotland, please stay." And suddenly the independence vote was on the front pages of English newspapers. And we realised, well, obviously the only way that we're going to cut through to people outside Scotland is by using massive celebrities. And so we had this idea of getting celebrities to write and say, you know, absolutely, if you know, as Scottish voters, you absolutely have the right to leave if you wanted, but we'd really rather you didn't. And the thing that was disconcerting about that, I remember, was that we had assumed that the British government, you know, David Cameron was the guy who'd given the green light to the referendum, that this mighty Rolls-Royce civil service, this government full of people who'd studied PPE at Oxford, that they would absolutely have you know, that their top boffins would be working on this. Anyway, within 2 days of our having this idea, we were in Downing Street being told that we were the front line.
Rooms full of political operatives with moleskin notebooks that were completely empty, sitting there going, "This is a great idea."
No, I was saying to us, so what's the plan?
I thought to myself, Louis XIV, Napoleon Bonaparte, Kaiser Wilhelm, Adolf Hitler, and Alex Salmond is going to get one over these guys. This is an absolute outrage. So, but I really want to do something, and I basically went to one of my greatest friends and one of the cleverest people I know, and the best wordsmith I know, and that's Tom Holland. And basically, I can advise you all, if you ever need to take on a massive task, look for those criteria. And Tom drafted a beautifully, like a Gettysburg address of simplicity, just going, it's your, dear people, our fellow citizens, it is of course your choice, but if you're interested in what we feel, we absolutely hope that you choose to remain in the United Kingdom. And we managed to get some celebrities to sign it. It began as slightly well, actually a slightly crap group of celebrities, to be honest, and slowly we sort of worked our way up.
You, wasn't it?
No, it was mainly television historians, and then we sort of slowly worked up. There was a game, what was the game, Joe Brand, I mean, Jesus. Anyway, and by the end we had this remarkable thing, so when we got David Beckham, it was a complete pain in the ass. David Beckham refused to sign Tom Holland's and issued a parallel but related side statement, which he sort of cannibalised Tom. I mean, it was ridiculous, like really needlessly annoying. And then when we landed David Attenborough, we thought we're going to do this. This is going to be very exciting. And then on the back of that, the whole point of the operation, in fact, which always gets overlooked, is that the celebrities were then going to drive people to this website where, in the end, over 100,000 people also signed. So it wasn't just celebrities; it was designed to be a great groundswell of people in the rest of the UK telling our friends and our cousins and our brothers and sisters in Scotland that we hoped, when they made their decision, they just bore in mind one simple fact: that we valued our common bond, we valued our connection, we valued all that we've achieved together over the past centuries. And we are excited about what we're going to go and continue to achieve over the next generations. And Tom in particular has been leading on that, because Tom is part of, you've heard earlier about these islands, Tom is surging ahead, producing some enormously impressive firepower from academics and intellectuals all over the country. And just briefly, because we're boring everyone, but tell everyone what you're up to.
Well, no, because it's absolutely marching in lockstep with Scotland and Union. I think that all of us who were involved in Better Together had a slight sense that the joyous civic aspect was more predominant on the yes side. I think it would be fair to say that Better Together campaign, for whatever reason, decided that they were not going to emphasise the positives of Britain. Indeed, they were barely even going to use the word Britain. And so there was a slightly sombre, negative quality to the entire campaign. And I remember that on the night before the vote, I went up to Edinburgh for a Channel 4 debate that was being held there. And on the train, I was feeling relatively confident. Arrived in Edinburgh and went to the venue, and they had two green rooms, one for the yes, one for the no. And I went by accident into the yes campaign, where it was full of jugglers and people with brightly coloured hair being joyous and civic. And then I went into the no green room, where it was kind of like steam rising off dank tweed. I felt so depressed as a result of the engagement with my fellow campaigners, that I thought, oh my God, we're going to lose. And then we didn't. And as Alastair said, there was this depressing feeling the moment that the referendum result had been announced that the Yes campaigners were gearing up for another shot. And the one lesson that I think both of us drew was absolutely that we can be joyous, and we can be civic, and we should be. We have such an amazing story to tell. And I think that whatever your views on Brexit, the inadequacy of the campaign to keep Britain in the EU reflected the same vices. You cannot make a case for something that you believe in simply from a defensive position. And the truth is that, again, whatever your views on Brexit, Britain is in a fairly, how can I put it, is in a bit of a mess at the moment. Politics is convulsive. England, in a sense, is now as divided as Scotland was after 2014. There is a case for saying that Farage is a Salmond who won. And as a result of that, those of us who want to defend the union between Scotland and the other constituent parts of the UK cannot just defend the status quo. We have to look to the future with the same sense of buoyancy and optimism that the best of the Yes campaigners look to. And I think that we can absolutely do that. And I think that one of the wonderful things about Scotland in Union is that it's actually put a smile on the faces of people in Scotland who want to stick up for the union. That they are making it seem positive again, fun again, and it should be, because it is an amazing, amazing story to tell.
It is. It is. Yes, it is, Tom. But we've coached along. We were aware that there is one of those dreaded auctions coming up after this. So, but I would just say we did organise we tried to make it more fun as we slightly hubristically got more signatures for this letter and more people backing it. Just for that, we had a big rally in Trafalgar Square, and we managed to. We sort of had. The conversations we had with very famous performers who just refused to turn up was absolutely remarkable. We got a few people. Tom almost refused to turn up because he was playing cricket against the Vatican. Thus, two of his greatest loves, saving the Union and cricket, brutally coincided on that one day.
Saving the Union won.
Saving the Union won, but typically he was pretty much able to do both. But and what was so, I just want to end on this memory I have from that day that was so special is that we had people from Scotland and we had people from England and we had people from Scotland talking about the beauty of the North Devon coast, and we had and hearing that you've all heard English people say how much they think, how beautiful they think Ardrett Castle is, and you're all bored to hear that because you know it already. But the people here from Scotland tonight, this is your city, this is London, it's your city. You built this city, you built this country, you built it alongside the people from England. There was no distinction 200 years ago, and that the spirit of that rally in Trafalgar Square is one that I hope Scotland Union are able to harness and move forward with. And to all of you that have come down tonight from Scotland Union, it's great to see you here in London. It's exactly where you should be. And to everyone else, please do what you can to support this fantastic organisation.
Yeah.